Deep in the remote Kazakh desert, inside a deteriorating brutalist hangar, sit the rusting remains of a multi-billion-dollar dream. How does a flawlessly engineered space shuttle, the absolute pinnacle of Soviet technological might, withstand the brutal extremes of orbit, only to be left to decay under a blanket of bird droppings and oxidized steel? The Buran orbiter wasn't a failure. It was a staggering success. But the forces that ultimately destroyed this machine didn't come from the cold void of space. They came from the slow, crushing weight of history and a catastrophic final collapse that buried the masterpiece under hundreds of tons of concrete. It is the oldest and largest operational space launch facility on Earth, but miles away from the active pads, isolated from the modern space program, lies Building 112. This assembly structure was constructed on a staggering scale. For over a decade, this cavernous space served as a dark, unheated tomb for the Buran orbiter, OK-1K2. The steel trusses above groan under the relentless wind. Inside, the temperature drops well below freezing in the winter and bakes during the summer. The elements slowly corrode the surrounding infrastructure. Walkways once meant for technicians in clean suits are now brittle and unsafe. The visual contrast between the environment and the machine is profound. 38,000 delicate silica thermal tiles sit, coated in a thick layer of industrial debris. But this deep decay hides a remarkable fact. This specific airframe was not an untested mock-up. It was a fully certified orbital vehicle. The engineers who built it designed a system, more advanced than anything flying at the time. Every sensor and flight surface was engineered for absolute perfection. And for one brief window in history, they achieved it. To understand why this masterpiece sits in ruins, we have to return to the single day it touched the stars. November 15th, 1988. A bitter, freezing morning on the Kazakh steppe, strapped to the side of the towering Energia super heavy lift rocket, sits OK-1K2. It is the culmination of the most expensive and ambitious program in Soviet history. The launch sequence initiates. Millions of pounds of thrust clear the pad with immense kinetic energy. The pristine white spacecraft tears through a heavy, icy cloud deck. Minutes later, it slips the bounds of gravity and enters the cold vacuum of low Earth orbit. But inside the pressurized cabin, the flight deck is completely empty. There are no cosmonauts strapped into the seats. There is no human pilot on board. The American space shuttle required a highly trained crew to fly, land, and manage its critical systems. The engineers behind the Buran demanded something far more complex. They designed their orbiter to execute its entire mission, completely autonomously. Once in orbit, the onboard computers take total control of the mission profile. Millions of lines of code process telemetry in real time. The delicate silica tiles shield the airframe from the severe temperature shifts of the orbital day and night cycle. For 2 full orbits, the empty machine circles the Earth. It is a silent, flawless triumph of aerospace engineering. But the true test of the system is the return. Re-entry is a brutal mathematical problem, and the slightest miscalculation guarantees total incineration. The Buran plunges back into the upper atmosphere. Plasma trails off its wings as the computers perfectly manage pitch and roll to bleed off hypersonic speed. As the orbiter approaches the Baikonur runway, its sensors detect a severe, unpredicted crosswind. A human pilot might have hesitated. The Buran's automated flight system simply processes the new telemetry. It initiates a sharp, unprogrammed banking maneuver to correct the approach vector. It aligns perfectly with the concrete. The wheels touch down with absolute precision. The entire mission lasted just 3 hours and 25 minutes. It was hailed as a monumental victory. It was supposed to secure the Soviet presence in orbit for decades to come. No one watching that perfect landing could have predicted the outcome. That was the first time the Buran flew, and it would be the final time it ever left the ground. The triumph of 1988 was not enough to save the program. While the engineers celebrated their flawless orbital mission, the foundation of their nation was fracturing. The Cold War was drawing to a close. By the early 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed entirely. The immense funding required to maintain the Baikonur complex evaporated overnight. The Buran had proven its capability. It had outmaneuvered the most complex re-entry variables without a single human on board. But a perfectly autonomous spacecraft was a luxury a crumbling empire could no longer afford. In 1993, the program was officially canceled. OK-1K2 was stripped of its hazardous orbital propellants. It was towed away from the active launch pads and moved deep into the industrial sector. It was rolled into the cavernous interior of Building 112 for what was supposed to be temporary storage. But temporary storage quickly became a permanent exile. The thousands of specialists who dedicated their lives to this machine were dispersed. They walked out of the complex and locked the massive steel doors behind them. They shut down the industrial climate control systems, and they left the absolute pinnacle of their aerospace industry, sitting entirely alone in the dark. The hangar was never designed to hold a delicate aerospace vehicle without active maintenance. Inside the unheated building, the true enemy of the orbiter wasn't the vacuum of space. It was time. The 1990s bled into the 2000s. Inside Building 112, the silence is absolute. Winter temperatures plunge to -40 degrees. Summer heat bakes the steel trusses, causing them to expand and contract day after day. Nature slowly reclaims the massive interior. Flocks of birds roost in the high rafters. Over the span of 14 years, their droppings coat the cutting-edge thermal protection system in a thick, corrosive paste. The pristine white exterior turns a mottled, oxidized brown. Scavengers occasionally slip past the perimeter security to strip the complex of valuable copper wiring. But the real danger to the Buran isn't on the ground. It hangs directly above. The roof of Building 112 was designed to bear massive structural loads, but only with constant, meticulous maintenance. The new Russian space agency, starved of funds, was forced into an impossible calculation. They had to prioritize active missions over the upkeep of legacy infrastructure. A decision was made to defer the costly repairs of the hangar's 300-foot roof. Water seeped into the structural joints. Ice formed and expanded, slowly fracturing the heavy beams over 14 bitter winters. By the spring of 2002, the structural integrity of Building 112 was fundamentally compromised. The trap was set. All it needed was the final trigger. On May 12, 2002, a severe stormfront moves across the Kazakh steppe. Torrential rain and gale-force winds batter the weakened exterior of Building 112. A maintenance crew of 8 workers is dispatched to the massive roof. Their task is to perform emergency patching on the compromised structural joints. They are working nearly 300 feet above the hangar floor, attempting to hold back the inevitable. But the ice and neglect have already done their damage. At exactly 9:40 in the morning, the structural math finally fails. The failure of a single support truss triggers a catastrophic chain reaction across the entire ceiling. Within seconds, the entire central section of the roof caves in. Hundreds of tons of concrete, steel, and debris impact the hangar floor. The Buran OK-1K2 is struck with unfathomable kinetic force. The airframe is completely crushed. Tragically, all 8 maintenance workers lose their lives in the collapse. The historic record of the disaster is stark, documenting a total structural failure, born of chronic underfunding and deferred maintenance. Today, the rubble of Building 112 has been partially cleared, but OK-1K2 is gone. A machine designed to endure the searing heat of atmospheric re-entry was ultimately destroyed by a poorly maintained roof and the collapse of an empire. It stands as a profound reminder that no matter how far we reach for the stars, the ground below always reclaims what we leave behind.